Hello, this is Pat Lynch, and you are listening to the Career Pathways Podcast. I have a special guest today, Nicolas Pattillo, our Director of International Education. And before we get to know a lot about Nicolas, we always want to have a big hello from producer Jayson. He's out there on the magic board, making it happen, as always. And so he's there always to save my bacon, make me look good, which you know what kind of task that has to be. All right. So, Nicolas.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, man, we're going to talk all things international. But before we do, kind of kick things off. Tell us about yourself, kind of where you're from, kind of where you went to school, kind of your career, and all the things that led you to eventually end up here at Lyon College.
Sure. Okay, well, it's a bit of a journey, so
Yeah.
strap in.
All right.
We'll start with where I'm from. I'm from a relatively small town, and I get that it's all relative, right, in terms of where we're from and how we gauge what's big or small. But for me, it's a town of about 30,000 people called Aiken, South Carolina. And it's most famous for horses and golf. We're right next to Augusta, Georgia, which the Masters is coming up soon. So everyone's going a little crazy out there, getting ready for that.
Have you ever been to the Masters?
Oh, man, I used to work all the time during Masters Week. So that's when we hold our spring breaks.
All right, yeah.
And so all the schools there hold it during Masters Week. So families either, one, get out of town, or two, they rent their houses or they go work at golf courses.
Yeah.
You'd make probably close to $1,000 a day in tips as a 15-year-old. It's crazy.
Right.
It's crazy, but it's a great place, and I hope you can go visit.
I've been to the Masters once.
Oh, awesome.
A guy who worked for me, his son had the same name as him, and he wrote in for the lottery.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And it's just like this. It's truly like lottery odds. And all of a sudden, he gets this thing from the Masters saying, congratulations, you have 2 tickets. And basically, you have 2 tickets for life.
Yeah, that's right. They don't even let you sign up anymore.
Yeah, and so he invited me one year, and it was just, it's like everything you see on TV, and then it's there. And it was like, I was really starstruck, and we didn't really follow a golfer. We walked all 18 and just wanted to see each hole and how gorgeous it is. And
the par 3s.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
It's the closest thing to pristine as I've seen outside of the Taj Mahal. Honest to God, the way they keep that course is, it's so well manicured. You could eat ribs off of it.
Look, we were about 3 minutes in, and you're already throwing international references. Yeah,
I just want to keep this ball rolling.
Yeah,
baby.
it's all right. So from Aiken, South Carolina, what was kind of next in your life?
Yeah, so after that, I ended up going to undergrad. Obviously, I did that at USC. And when I say USC, I mean the one...
California?
No, I mean the one that was established in 1801. Right.
And that is?
Yeah, the University of South Carolina.
All right.
Wherein I did a double major. So I did a BS in criminology, criminal justice, and I did a BA in sociology. At the same time, I just happened to be fortunate enough. I was doing a lot externally with clubs, organizations, sports, and I ended up getting the opportunity afterwards to move to Australia. So I was playing rugby in undergrad, and so I thought I'd move to Australia, do a little work, try to play a little rugby.
Yeah.
But those guys are meaner and bigger than I will ever be.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
Because, I was going to talk about it a little later, but let's talk it now. So you had, as Director of International Education, you're working with students from outside the U.S. and here. You had an experience actually as an international student. What was that like?
That was, at first, it was really daunting, actually. Yeah. The pedagogy that's used, the emphasis on grades is very different. Instruction is very different. There's no keeping attendance, right? So most of your grade comes from your midterm and your final. And so whether that's
no pressure there.
That's exactly right. Pros and cons for sure, right? I don't know if I'd rather have, homework every week with quizzes and exams along the way, but there you get 2 chances pretty much.
Right.
And I was not used to that at all, right? And everything is open-ended.
Yeah.
Right. So they're looking for a lot more, I think, depth in terms of critical inquiry and critical thought. And so the ability to connect and look beyond the surface was really important to them. I mean, again, from a teaching perspective. And it wasn't how we kind of are raised in the U.S. education. It's more rote memorization.
Oh, right.
When I grew up, right, I'm getting old. So it was more that it was more student centered, which I think is what we're shifting to really well
absolutely.
here.
Yeah.
So that was
so
good.
Then you were studying criminology and everything.
So in undergrad, right?
Yeah.
But as I went to my master's, I switched over to education, and and so there they do it a little differently also. Where in here we have elementary and now middle school and then high school.
Right.
There they're a little more separate, a little more siloed. They'll have primary school, and primary school for them may be K through 7.
Okay.
Right. And then they may have grades 8 and 9 as kind of their middle. And then they'll have
just 8 and 9.
Right. And then they'll do lower secondary. And sometimes lower secondary may be 8, 9, and 10. Right. So it just depends on state and territory, just like the U.S. There's not always a national curriculum. So there's a little deviation from state or territory. And so in their system, we did K through 7, and then lower secondary for mine was 7, 8, and 9.
Right.
Or sorry, 8, 9, and 10. And then they go to upper secondary. If they want to go to university, it's that grades 11 and 12.
Right.
If they want to at grade 10, they say, look, I don't want to go to university. I'm going to learn a trade. I'm going to be a plumber, an electrician, which, hey, great money in that. So they actually go to what's called a TAFE. It's like a technical advising center where they learn this.
Now, was Australia set up like I'm familiar with like the UK where they give you exams, and then you if you don't have exams, then you trade school for you. And then if not, you go on to university.
That's right. So we probably equate it to that. When I'm not sure if we still use this as much, but when we used to have tech prep, college prep, IB, all of this, right? They kind of have similar pathways, just different names.
Yeah, because I remember going to high school, and it was like I was out of my friends, I was the only like college guy, and I was always wondering why they were the ones that were all in shop.
It's that
all the cool stuff.
That's right, the stuff that you could do something.
And they all was in Detroit. They were all gearheads, so it worked out perfectly. That's awesome. And I'm taking English, and none of my friends are in it.
Comp 101, man. It's come on.
Yeah. So then, was there any time a decision to stay in Australia, or did you see a pathway home?
Sure. No, a big part of me wanted to stay for sure. But then another part of me, and I think we'll get to it later in the conversation, is kind of what drove me to international education.
Yes.
And that was part of that decision to eventually migrate back to the U.S. Is I just didn't see that same kind of completeness necessarily for myself in Australia. But man, I'll go back in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
How is the compatibility with language? Because it's like supposedly we both speak English.
Yeah, that is supposedly true. But just like with other languages, right? And especially as they migrate out to new countries, we create new slangs.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll ever forget it, and I hope not at least. But one of the first lines ever given to me by an Australian was, "Oi, throw the grog in the esky, toss it in the boot, and let's go to the Strand." And I'm like, I had no idea what this guy, who, FYI, Australia is really strange in my opinion. Yeah. There's no one like Americans were 6 feet typically, right?
Yeah.
In Australia, it feels like everyone is 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", or 5'8" or shorter. There's none of this in between. And the guy I get is 6'5", right? 280 pounds.
Don't argue with
Don't
him.
argue with him. Get in the car and go to the Strand, whatever it is.
So what exactly was he telling you?
So yeah, essentially it translates out to, hey, throw the beer into the cooler, put that into the trunk of the car, and let's go to the beach.
So now we know what your college experience was like.
That's right, grad school. That's right. Yeah.
Hello.
It was a very welcoming ceremony, to say the least.
Yeah, of course. And that was what, Foster's or?
Well, the oil can, of course.
Yeah,
no. My favorite for Australia is Tooheys New.
Okay.
Which, if anyone from Australia hears this, they'll be so upset.
Yeah.
Because two things, and I know you have a question about this, but I'll give you one now. Is regionally they have beers that they drink.
Right.
And New South Wales is more of a Tooheys New region. Right. But I lived in Queensland.
Right.
Right. And this is kind of the more southern territory of Australia, right? Even though it's in the north. But for them, they drink a beer called 4X Gold.
Okay.
And I have to say, this was the other thing about my first time in Australia. When you get there, you see all these 4X signs, lit up in red bulbs, red and white light bulbs.
Yeah.
4X. And for the longest time,
I'm thinking.
I never
it
had.
Starts with a P and ends in an N.
Yeah. I never had the audacity to ask, for the first month and a half while I was there, what is this?
What is that? Yeah,
I've seen 3, but 4. What's going on here?
Yeah,
right?
It's like Spinal Tap. It's an 11.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, finally I had to have the conversation. But that was amusing, to say the least, because I was lost for sure. I'm like, what is this?
Oh man! So it's now leaving Australia and then coming back to South Carolina?
Yeah, so I came back to South Carolina, and then at that point, it was a bit of a struggle, right? I was 27. I'd lived the last 5 years in Australia.
Yeah.
My whole family had kind of moved on, right? At that same time, parents get divorced. Within the first few weeks or so of me being back, my mom got remarried, my dad got remarried, and my brother got married. And
two Christmases.
Yeah, well, that's right. I was like, finally, I could get some good presents.
4, yeah, you got 4. Yeah.
So it was that was interesting, and just coming back, right? Like, Australia has a bit of a culture wherein they work to live, not live to work.
Yeah,
and so coming back to the U.S., where we're very driven by time and money. Yeah. There was a bit of a hard time kind of finding that place to slide back in.
Yeah.
But eventually I found it. And after a few months of begging someone to let me volunteer in the international office at the University of South Carolina, it was a branch campus in Aiken.
Aiken, yeah.
So she was so sweet. She let me volunteer. And that ended up rolling into a job in housing, where I was a resident director of housing for a year. But I always knew I wanted to be in international aid.
Yeah. So then you're at Aiken, and then did you eventually ended up at the main campus?
Yeah. So I eventually got to the main campus after I got into admissions at the branch campus finally. Right. And then we were pretty lucky there. I had a great boss. He was always super supportive.
Right.
He didn't always understand maybe my ideas, and he reeled me in several times, right? I've never forgotten his face when I tried to go to him and do a goat roast. And to do this goat roast, we were going to have to buy
Is that a satanic ritual?
No. So, I thought about this. I'm like, look, how do you connect with internationals? And at the time, we were working a lot in the Middle East.
Right.
And so for here, we're like, let's have a pizza party or wings. Right. Well, for them, they do goat roast.
Sounds right.
Right?
Okay,
it's reasonable.
Yeah.
But then we realized we're going to have to buy a live goat and then have it slaughtered in the appropriate manner. And it was a lot of hurdles. But, in his 20 plus years, he's never had a counselor ask him.
Well, did the goat get killed?
The goats were eaten, and they were delicious. It was phenomenal.
There you are.
We had a little trouble because this was all going to take place in a city park.
Right.
So that created it a little. We had to find some
man.
workarounds, but yeah, goat. Hey, goat is delicious, man.
Never had it. Yeah.
Try
Yeah,
it. Give it a go.
Well, I got a feeling we're going to see something maybe in line.
When it comes to different food, I think we've got a lot of exposure and we can do a lot of things.
Awesome. So then, in USC Columbia,
yes.
So Columbia, South Carolina, is that? Did you cross over then into international education?
Yeah, I was lucky to get to do it for about the last year and a half of my admissions job at the previous institution. And then that's when I ended up getting up there. I was our director for the intensive English program, the English program for internationals. And I was over immigration and admissions there.
Yeah.
And so that was a blast.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. I mean, we all love our schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like I've come to love Lion now and our sports and our students. It always holds a special place for you. So to get to work at places you care about, it's awesome.
Yeah. And what is it with South Carolina where they've done such a great job in international? Their business schools is like one of the top international business schools, and you think South Carolina, but they've done something right. What is it?
In my opinion, we had a donor, Darla Moore, and she's been just so instrumental, one in investing, but also helping us prioritize internationalization.
Yeah,
right, and helping. I believe the South is almost always behind when it comes to economic shifts, and she's done a phenomenal job of being able to always get out in front of that shift and help lead us in that direction, especially. For USC as an institution, she did such a great job.
Wow.
And she put her money where her mouth was.
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to you, right?
Well, so then from South Carolina, what was next in the journey?
So I was really lucky. I ended up doing a presentation at a regional conference for international educators. And there was a guy in the audience at the time. And after my presentations, I think I had titled the presentation "Earning Benjamins or Earning Euros and Spending Benjamins," and it was about how small institutions can leverage international recruitment and enrollment on creating new revenue streams. Right? It's always about creating that symbiotic relationship, right? And so I did the presentation. He came up to me afterwards. He's like, "Look, I think I've got a place that you would do so well at." And he had just he had resigned that position about a year earlier.
Right.
He had moved on, but he knew the role was still open. He put me in touch with the president. They flew me out there to the University of Arkansas, Fort Smith.
Yep.
And so had the interview. I was super fortunate again.
Yeah.
I got the role, and for about 7 years, I was over everything from enrollment management, immigration, study abroad, all of it over there.
Wow. And UA Fort Smith, they have a pretty sizable international student population because
there are a couple of fold. The biggest things that we did there was probably set up the MOUs, the 3+0 MOUs in China. So we set up 2 degree plans there. And last time, just before I left, I think we had more than 550 students enrolled in that program.
Right.
And so that the thing there was it was meant to be leveraged as a pipeline on the back end because we issue the associates, then they have 1 year, they come over, and then they can do their bachelor's.
Right.
And then, and one day maybe, we should get a Study Arkansas consortium so we can keep these students in Arkansas.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, because you look at like areas like California, New York,
Colorado. They do great.
Director of International Education, what is the job responsibility? Like, what do you do? Oh, he's going to the notes, ladies and gentlemen.
It's getting real.
It
warmed up a little.
It's like fun.
Here.
Yeah, fun time's over. Okay.
Ooh, man, real talk. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to really understand that. Is it study abroad? It is, right?
Yeah.
And within each kind of what I call or designate a knowledge community, right? So main knowledge communities are going to be immigration.
Right.
It's going to be enrollment management, It's going to be study abroad and short-term programs.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be holistic programming, right? Because the students come here, yeah, they're coming here to evolve academically, mentally, right?
Yeah.
But that's not all they are as a person, right? We need students to grow socially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, in all these ways. And that's part of what a liberal arts education is anyway, right? Is creating that well-rounded individual who can be that bridge in so many ways.
And what if people ask me as far as like how to describe kind of what you do in a most simple way is that you're kind of that champion for all the students up from outside the U.S.
I try at least.
No, it's just because you think about, well, you were a student overseas, so and here at least there, we can go back to they sort of spoke English, but you can kind of understand it, but you have some, now you have a student here that English is, a second language, third or fourth, and now brand new, Batesville, Arkansas, Fort Smith, Arkansas is not, that could be a real culture shock. Absolutely. And so, here's somebody that can kind of help.
I do try, and honestly, and I don't think we've gotten to it, but I'll just go ahead and preface it now, which is the idea that I really struggled as an international. Now, there were times where I had abundant success, but initially I struggled.
Really?
And it was, man, I financially, my parents, which is fine. I was an adult and they're like, look, this is grad school. Yeah. If you want to go, we support you, but we can't help you pay. Right. And that's fine. So financially, it was very hard. Culturally, it was very different. Pedagogically, it was very different. I didn't know how to go about finding a job. Did I need to get a national identification number? How do I get cell phone numbers? Wow. Like it was the international office who kind of took me under their wing, right, and showed me the way, right? They taught me how to do it, and it changed my life. Like it taught
think about
me
all the empathy you now have for everybody that every student you encounter.
That's right. It is crazy to think about what we take for granted, right? We see these things as obvious like paths of decisions, but for an international, they have no clue what is the brand name for deodorant, right?
What is the brand name for deodorant?
We don't have their deodorant. We don't have shampoo that most countries have.
Right.
So how do you make those evaluations? How do you make those equivalencies?
Yeah.
It's hard. You just got to talk and communicate.
And learn and everything. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, because I came to Lyon. This is my first experience in an academic institution, and Lyon was still kind of international education was still limited because of COVID restrictions, and so then if things finally lifted, and now we're benefiting from that, from your great efforts to, where we have more students coming in. But what was it like pre-COVID? And then we don't even have to talk COVID. It was just forget that. But then where we are now,
it was. So pre-COVID, it's really cool actually. History isn't anything we do,
right? And
international education is no different. The U.S. started tracking international students by numbers, at least, in about 1947. And you can actually track enrollment trends from 47 to today, right? There are lots of tools to do this, lots of resources. But even today, there's only been, probably just a little more than a handful of times where you've seen international enrollment dip in the United States.
Right.
And almost every one of those occurrences correlate to something going on globally or at least something somewhat catastrophic, even nationally.
Right.
So, for example, 95, maybe there was a bit of a financial crisis.
Right.
68, got the Vietnam War going on.
Right.
What happened 02, 03, 04, 05? Just post 9/11, right? Lots of immigration regulation changes, right? And then there was another massive shift. And again, just like so many other things that affects politics, impacts international enrollment. So around 16, 17, 17, 18, we started to see a dip in enrollment there.
Right.
And then by the time we hit COVID, right? But you're still talking pre-COVID numbers are still just a shade or just a touch shy of 1 million.
Yeah.
And even now we're cracking 1 million again. In fact, we're near record highs
so we're
now.
Back.
Yeah, we're back. I mean, we're back almost better than ever. But when COVID hit, we saw about an 80% drop in if a new student enrollment. I think we saw, what was it? 46% drop in new international student enrollment, a 15% drop in total enrollment, which those are massive hits.
Yeah.
Because if you're not aware, the amount of financial impact, so international students contribute approximately $40.1 billion. That's with a B. $1 billion to the U.S. economy.
Right.
Just to Arkansas alone, it contributes, what is it, 146.6 million.
You know, with numbers like that, why is it that we don't make studying here in the U.S. more inviting?
It's interesting, actually. So a lot of this is run through our Department of State. We do look at education as an export.
Yeah.
And they've set up things called Education USA all over the world.
Right.
And I think they're in over 160, maybe 190 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And this is essentially, sometimes it's in our embassy, sometimes they're standalone shops. But you go there, international students can go there and they can learn all about the education system, how to apply, what SEVP certified schools there are that they can use to get visas. So Department of State does invest in this, but, and you touched on it earlier, right? Like California and all these other, they're doing it too.
Yeah.
Again, the South, we're just a little behind the curve right now because I've not seen many of those initiatives anywhere in the South.
Yeah, and it's almost that thought that people will look at a zero-sum kind of equation that that somebody from outside the U.S. takes a spot at a college that would have gone to a U.S. which you know where that's going.
Yeah, displacement is not even close to what's going on, right? Domestic students are graduating at lower rates than almost ever before, right? Yeah. Students entering higher education are at some of their lowest rates than ever before, and they're only going to get worse over time. And so you got to start asking yourself, do you want to position yourself like Japan, which truly limits immigration and knowledge expertise and skilled workforce, right? Or do you want to be able to bring in some of the best, right? Yeah. At my last institution, international students had the highest GPA out of any cohort on campus.
Yeah.
Right? So the students that are coming, they're brilliant, they're very intelligent, they're very driven, they're very motivated. We just have to learn that the opportunities, I think from my perspective, it's about making sure America is great, right? Making sure Arkansas is great.
Right.
And how do we do that? We do that with educated, successful, driven individuals.
Well, kind of a related question is that, how does the college benefit from having international students on campus?
Sure. So one, just for every 3 internationals students, that typically creates 1 job.
Okay.
So that's number 1. So whether it's strictly related to the institution or the city itself, just that benefit is huge. Outside of that, you start looking whether it's tangibles or intangibles, right? Learning or working with students from different backgrounds, different cultures, it's only going to increase intercultural communication, interpersonal communication. It's only going to help critical inquiry and thought. Your ability to look at a problem and see a solution in multiple ways because, I know I can do it this way because of how I've been taught. Right. But I've also seen my buddy from here do it this way and it works too, right? Just like I now know there are many ways to eat a banana. Right.
Right. You can pinch the top.
Exactly. Or you can use you use the stem as the handle. Right? Okay. Instead of peeling from the stem.
Yeah.
So there are little things that you see people do differently. They're doing the same thing. They're just doing it in a different way.
Yeah, and I know us as educators, it's the kind of expand the world for our students because many of our students are from Arkansas,
Sure.
and so then they study here. Chances are they'll stay in
Yep.
Arkansas, and here's a golden opportunity to meet someone from Serbia, someone from Brazil, somebody from Nepal. I mean, it's all of a sudden the world just
It
opens
opens
up.
up.
Yeah, yeah,
And it gets a little smaller at the same time.
yeah,
Right? It's very cool how that
yeah.
works. And think about it like this. Walmart didn't just start overnight as, an international giant,
Right.
But now a lot of their stuff is imported, right? That we buy
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
US.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you might meet someone who can help you manufacture goods in one place,
Mhm.
import them, and you can still create a lot of opportunity in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And worst case, you made a friend and you got a free couch to stay on when you go visit them.
Yeah. Hey, there you go.
You know what I'm
'Cause
saying?
I like in my business career before coming to Lion, one practice area we had was working with organizations on cross-cultural competency,
Sure.
which we had one of our biggest clients. They were it was a German company with a U.S. U.S. headquarters in Atlanta, and the Germans and the U.S. just could not connect, and I was doing other work for them, and the VP of HR just brought it up, said, oh, can you find
How
a
can you help?
solution? And so I dove in, found a German national that literally that consulted on just that,
Sure.
and I remember he used it was a tool called Cultural Detective, and he had this culture lens, and so a list of things that here's how like Americans, and then here's how Germans, and then you could see all where all the matches and then mismatches,
Yeah.
and I'm sure this is like your
This
life.
is orientation 101. In
Tell me
fact,
more.
yeah.
Tell me more.
So
Yeah.
when we bring
Yeah.
new students in, you're exactly right,
Yeah.
right? There's so many potential clashes that can occur, whether it's language, whether it's micro expressions or body language, or just how we literally interact or even look at people, right?
Right.
In some cultures, they're taught never look at someone in the eye, especially an elder, and
Right.
especially if you're in trouble.
Mhm.
Never look him in the eye. Culturally here, at least the way I was raised,
Yeah.
if I don't look my dad in the eye, if I'm in trouble,
Right.
then I'm in even more trouble,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, you're guilt. You've just admitted it.
That's right, right? So it's like just these
Right.
little things. And again, it's not just that kind of stuff. It's just so many things, how we can even say things, our language we hope can directly translate into our second or third
Mhm.
languages. That is rarely the case, right?
Yeah.
Word order, where we put verbs, things like this. There's just so many areas, and we have to learn. What you're talking about is cultural relativism,
Okay.
right? And so the idea is whether you're looking at it through a lens per se, I like to use a spectrum,
Yeah.
right? And on one side we have cultural relativism, on the other side we have ethnocentrism.
Right.
And when we're ethnocentric, we're judging everyone's actions based on our cultural norms and values.
Right.
And that's okay, especially when you're in your own country, right? But simultaneously, if we've ever been somewhere that we didn't know people, or, it's a party or it's a venue and we're just unfamiliar with it, we ease into this, right? And we hope that people will be kind and patient with us while we figure out our surroundings, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're ethnocentric, we don't tend to be kind or patient as much.
Right.
When we're culturally relative, it turns out, yes, we can understand that they're doing it differently because that's how they know to do it.
Yeah.
We can help guide their decision-making moving forward, right? And help them understand that this may be more appreciated culturally to do it another way.
The cultural relativism sounds a lot like emotional intelligence in some ways, doesn't it?
The EQ man, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just understand, right? If you understand that everyone struggles, full stop,
Right.
international or domestic,
Yeah.
you're doing great.
Right.
And if you can actively apply that in situations or scenarios where you're engaging with internationals, that conversation, that interaction will probably go way smoother if you speak slowly, speak clearly, right?
How about speaking really loud?
Yeah, speaking loudly, right?
Always works.
Yeah, it's well, that's right. That's right. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it was fascinating. Watching this consultant work in terms of just how it was like almost like I thought it was going to be like a marriage counselor or something, but what he was really trying to do is just bring that level of understanding,
That's right.
and so they to avoid all these potential
That's right.
conflicts. Well, uh, that was all the easy stuff.
Oh, goodness.
Now let's get to the hard stuff. No, I'm joking.
The nitty-gritty.
World travel.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, because as this podcast said, Austin Powers is not the only international man of mystery. So, Nicholas, kind of tell us everywhere you've been. Really, well, yeah, because it sounds compared to most of us, who think we've traveled.
Sure.
Then it's like, hold my beer. Let me tell you a story.
Yeah, there's a few things I've learned, which is one, to never talk about travel or travel stories unless specifically invited to do so.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes I think it is off-putting for people because it's like, man, you're either one lying or there's just no way. It's just always so much disbelief. But everything I'm going to tell you is 100% true in terms of where I've been and what's happened when I've been to those places.
All right, let's fire it off.
All right, here we go. South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Malawi, Tanzania, Egypt, Kenya, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, United Arab Emirates, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, China, Poland, Czech Republic, which I think actually goes by a different name now. I think they're trying to switch that, so I might want to check up on that. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, can't even read this one. Canada, probably, yeah. South America. So within South America, this has been South and Central America. So we'll start at the top there. So Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama. Moving down, we have Colombia, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, Argentina. I've not been to kind of the central part too much, but Bolivia's on my hit list. I absolutely want to hit Bolivia. Outside of that, I've spent some time in the Caribbean as well. Fiji, New Zealand. I lived in Australia. So Hong Kong.
Was this from your time in Australia, and it was easier to travel to that part of the world, or was it coming from the U.S. and going out?
Sure. So most of it, actually, when I was in Australia, I was a poor college student.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And so I did get to go to New Zealand, which actually, quick anecdote.
Yeah.
I have been deported and banned from Australia for 4 years, I think it was.
Yeah.
Because I, quote unquote, overstayed my visa.
Yeah.
Which I didn't. I was changing visa statuses. I had been working with my case agent.
Yeah.
And she's like, look, you need to leave the country and re-enter. I was like, okay, I'll go to New Zealand. I'll do a hike for a week, which Christchurch and New Zealand, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
If you get a chance, go.
Yeah.
North Island, South Island, it doesn't matter. It's beautiful. But regardless, as I re-entered Australia, I had 1 day left on my old visa, and for whatever reason, the Customs and Border Patrol there didn't have any notes to switch me over. So I came back in on my old visa, not knowing it. 6 months later, I start getting letters to show up to like 103 Lonsdale Street in Canberra, Australia.
Whoa.
The Australian Capital Territory.
And what, they're just going to get you in a van and take you to the airport?
So look, man,
packing?
I walk in there.
Yeah.
I walk in there, and I kid you not, I had two like, I guess the Australian equivalent of Marines come and get me. They walked me back to a room. I ended up being in this room for about 6 hours with a guy named Mr. Faz Gill. I'll never forget him. He was super nice about kicking me out of the country. Yeah. He was very polite about it, and they debriefed me and asked me all these questions. Yeah. But eventually they're like, look, you overstayed your visa. You got to leave. So I had to leave the country for a couple of months. During that same time, I appealed.
Yeah.
And I had all the emails of evidence,
Yeah.
right? And so they overturned the appeal. But for a couple of months, I was banned from an entire continent of this planet.
There you go.
That's,
Didn't come up in the interview.
No, it did not. Thank God.
Oh,
Thank God.
You listen to all those countries in South America.
Sure.
Was it like an individual visits, or did you just kind of say, I'm going to go to South America and then take a trip and see several countries?
So I hope for those of you listening to this, this being the career pathway.
Yes.
I need y'all to know, I didn't even know the job I have even existed when I was in college, right?
Yeah.
Didn't even know this type of job existed. And since taking this job, this is getting to answer your question, I promise. I've traveled to 30 plus countries just because of jobs.
Oh, right. Okay.
I go for recruitment. I go for building institutional partnerships or MOUs. There's just site visits, right? Just to make sure things are safe or be able to explain it to domestic students or international who want to study abroad. Right. So sometimes it's groups. Sometimes I may do like a Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador. Sometimes I may do like a Peru, Ecuador, Chile, Brazil. I love Brazil, but it's so far away. But again, it's a beautiful country and it's got a lot to offer. We're talking to several institutions in several countries right now in South America about new partnerships.
Wow. Yeah. Now, explain to our studio audience agents, which that was something completely new. Now everybody thinks of agents. Oh yeah, Hollywood or sports, but there's agents when it comes to recruiting students from outside the U.S.
Without getting too deep into the weeds, right? Here's the deal. It costs money, whether it's domestic or international, to recruit students. Someone's got to do it, right? We wish that we had the global name recognition that students just applied to us willy-nilly and we were beating them away with a stick. But like so many other schools, that's not the case. So we have to we have different strategies, some called active strategies, some called armchair strategies. And so when we start talking about using agents, we're talking about a hybrid approach because we can manage an agent digitally from here in Arkansas. But they can be located in any country in the world, in any city in the world. Right. And so their job is to recruit internationals on our behalf. With that being said, we also teach them really early and very often that we may not be the right fit for every student. We want students to be happy when they come here, right? Expectation mitigation, we need them to know, right? We're a small school. We're going to focus more one-on-one attention. If you need a ride to go to the driver's license or go grocery shopping, someone's here to help you, right? Not every school's like that, and not every student wants that, and that's okay. Right.
Now with recruiting internet, you get involved with recruiting.
Sure.
So now are you kind of on the agent theme? You're going to be like Nick Saban. You're going to be in the living room.
That's right.
Saying shaking hands and but how does that process work?
The best way I can put this is you think of whomever's in this role, in my role, you think of them as a map maker, right? In Amerigo Vespucci or however, right? And you think of everyone else as kind of your co-captains of a ship, right? True. And you help them get you to where you need to be, but you show them the map, right? And for agents, I know what we need and we know where the emerging markets are, right? So now we need to target those regions. We need to find those agents, but simultaneously on the back end over here internally, we also need to do things that make us prepared and ready to receive these internationals, right? And so there's a lot happening both in front of the screen and behind the curtain.
Yeah, one thing, getting to know our team in first year advising is there's students that have active parents. So they're getting calls from the parents about what's going on, right or wrong, mostly not right. So Does that same kind of behavior exist with students internationally?
Man, that's a great question. The only time I can ever remember having a parent reach out to me
Yeah.
is to say thank you, is to say,
Yeah, perfect.
hey,
Yeah.
our son or our daughter is really happy. People are helping them, people are talking to them.
Mhm.
Expectations, it's so scary, right? Like we worry about going to New York,
Yeah.
right? And that's within our country, within our
Yeah.
language area. Think about sending your son or daughter thousands of miles away
True. Yeah.
to a different country, to a different culture, to
Yeah.
a different language where they know nobody 9 times out of 10.
Mhm.
Um, and so they're very, very thankful for any interaction
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. And honestly, we do such a good job. Everyone here does such a good job of always watching out for the next person, I think.
Right.
So even if I'm not always touching base as soon as I should be or could be, I usually don't worry too much because I'm always checking with other people.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it works. It's a really good community in that sense. But
Yeah. God. You know what? This is more for that our audience explaining, like when international students are here in the U.S., kind of what they can do and not do, and how they find work. Because when I came here and I'm in career services now, all of a sudden I'm thrown OPT, CPT, just and it's like
on campus employment.
yeah, and could you explain kind of all the different aspects for students as far as here and what options they have?
Absolutely. So one thing to note about the internationals is they start behind the 8 ball, full
Right.
stop.
Yeah.
And by that, they don't have driver's license. They don't have social security card. So
Yeah.
how do they work, right? If we require a social security card to be entered into the SAVE database that the government wants us to run these through,
Mm-hmm.
then they need a social, right? But how do
Right.
they get a social? Well, now they need a job offer letter, right?
Yep.
Well, they don't need just a job offer letter. They also need a student status letter.
Yeah.
And then they need to set appointments. And they're in that regard, there's so much that international students have to go through. When you talk about CPT, that's curricular practical
Right.
training. This is something that a student can only do while enrolled in school.
Right.
And it's got to be an integral and established part of the school's curriculum,
Right.
which is hard because we didn't build mandated internships into most of our majors.
Right.
Right. So we've got to make sure the students signing up for internship class, right?
Right,
So we
right.
can establish it as part of their curriculum.
Right.
Right.
And we've done that, right?
We've
Yeah.
done that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We've created like a special internship. Okay.
Yep. And
And so then OPT then is
optional practical training.
optional. Okay.
And then within OPT, you have different options as well. So you have
Right.
pre-completion OPT,
Yep.
which a student could do just before they're graduating. And the only time
Mhm.
I recommend this, you've gotten a job offer from Walmart or Target or even, a family company around the corner. Doesn't
Right.
matter. But they say to you, listen, I need you now or you can't start at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Internationals, again, don't get the luxury of picking and choosing most of the time.
Yeah.
So if someone's saying they're willing to hire them and they're doing it now, then yeah, we're gonna do pre-completion OPT.
Right.
They're limited in the hours they can work when they do that. They're limited in the amount of money they can make because of the number of hours. So I don't encourage most internationals to go that route.
Right.
I encourage them to do the post-completion OPT.
Yeah. And then if they graduate and they want to stay here in the States, what happens then?
So there's a few options. Their OPT, depending on their field of study, their
Mhm.
major area of study, they will either get one year of OPT,
Yep.
or they'll be eligible for 1 year of OPT plus an additional 24-month extension
Yeah.
for a total of 36 months.
And that's for STEM.
And that's for STEM, the
Yeah.
science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and honestly, the best undergraduate degree, in my opinion, in the US right now is nursing.
Yeah.
Nursing, full stop. I mean, every student I've had that was international had their permanent residency within 12 months of graduation.
Yeah. And it's
Right.
still so high demand.
Such a high demand.
Yeah. Because today with we had our employer advisory council talk to the VP of HR
Sure.
at White River Medical Center here in town. She wants to know everything
That's right.
about that because it's such a natural pipeline for them on something they vitally need.
It's a feeder. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Retain your talent. That's what we were talking about with Arkansas in general.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Back to all world travels.
Sure. Oh, no.
Interesting stories from world travels. Now, you got me. You threw a teaser about getting deported.
Sure.
So now it's like, okay, now tell us more. Tell the studio audience more.
I don't know exactly how far I can go with this or what the statute of limitations are from an immigration side.
Well, we'll let producer Jayson weigh in on this.
Okay.
How far should he go?
As far as you want.
Okay.
All right, there you go.
One thing, okay.
Nobody's listening anymore.
One of the things I would say is that I may or may not have, which I guess I've already told you everything is true. So let me just say, I one time may have had to bribe my way across a border into Cambodia. I was in,
Say more.
Yeah, please go on. So yeah, exactly. So I was in Thailand.
Yeah.
And this was right as I was graduating college.
Yeah.
A couple of buddies and I decided to do a trip, and so we're doing our trip, and we ended up spreading out along the way. Sometimes coming back, sometimes hey, it was fun, brother, right?
Yeah.
But we're in Thailand at the time, and one of my buddies and I decided, like, hey man, why don't we go to Cambodia?
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, so we hopped on the back of a scooter. And so over there, like, you can kind of just stick your thumb out, and someone will just ride by and pick you up. And you'll be, they will. And they'll be like, where are you going?
Yeah.
And you'll just kind of tell them where you want to go. And they'll be like, okay, it's X amount of Thai baht, right?
Yeah.
It's great. You're on the back of a scooter. Helmet laws apply. So always got to wear your helmet. But we told them, well, take us to the border. Okay. But what we didn't know is that you had to apply for a visa 3 days in advance.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, man, we just spent quite a while making our way to the Cambodian border.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of at a port of entry that's kind of in the middle of the jungle. It's really weird, man.
Right.
It's like, it's literally like forest and then just a road with rising gates, right? That you manually lift and lower. And that was the port of entry to Cambodia. And as we get to the front of the line, the guy's like, where's your visa? Where's your visa? And I'm like, oh, we didn't know we had to have one, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen here, right? And he's like, well, you need a visa. Okay, we need a visa. How can we get a visa, sir?
Yeah.
Right? Sure enough, he's like, you got money? You got money? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, $30 American. 30 American. Okay. Whew. So we give him our $60 and he walks away. We were sure we were never going to see our money or that guy again.
Yeah.
Full stop, right? Like,
you know,
he walked into the woods.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, can't follow him.
Yeah.
And about 20 minutes later, here comes that same guy, like running after us, yelling our names, waving our passports.
Yeah.
And we're like, thank God. Like, he has our passports. He had backrolled his stamp 3 days and gave us the visa.
Yeah.
And so we as we entered the other side, we got a new scooter ride.
Yep.
And we ended up, like, it was pretty early in the morning still. So we ended up riding around Angkor Wat and Siem Reap. And if anyone's seen Tomb Raider, right?
Yeah.
You know when they're in the jungle in Tomb Raider?
Yeah.
That's Angkor Wat. That's the largest temple in the world.
Yeah.
And so it's beautiful. And as you see its reflection off the water, the sun, and this temple, actually, it was a lost temple for centuries. And
just
it wasn't
the jungle.
The jungle grew up over, and it wasn't until we had discovered the power of flight, a pilot was flying over it and saw it in the jungle.
Wow.
And that's how it was rediscovered. But at one point, it was one of the largest cities on Earth. It's a beautiful, amazing place. And in fact, if y'all ever want to support the Cambodian people, Shipley's, I think the owners of Shipley's are Cambodian.
Wonderful.
So we've talked about Siem Reap. They're great people.
So you're throwing out a country, you're bribing your way into another. So So,
There-
share some more, please.
So, okay, I'll give you two more pretty good ones. There was, three maybe.
Yeah.
So, because one leads to the next.
Yep.
There was a time when I was in South Africa.
Right.
And if anybody's ever watched like the History Channel or Discovery Channel, you may have seen the Mythbusters.
Right.
And so we're in South Africa, and one day we decided to go do the world's longest bungee at Blue Cross Bridge. Okay. But as we're driving out there, we're like, look, this is so far. We should do something else.
Right.
We decide we're going to do a great white shark dive. And-
Okay.
yeah. Right. And so, so we decide we're going to do this great white shark dive. And sure enough, we do it. Right.
Mhm.
We get on the boat. And we actually met the Mythbusters early the second morning. We were getting like a hot chocolate, and there were the Mythbusters in the cafe, and they were going to bust myths on great whites. And so we could see their boat across from our boat. Anyway, they put you in a cage, and they essentially, you kind of float at the top of the cage. You have spotters all over the boat. And what they'll do is they'll be like, when it's time, they'll yell shark. And you'll grab your regulator. You're kind of in scuba gear.
Yeah.
You'll grab your regulator and you'll go down.
Right.
Well, right as I grabbed my regulator, I heard, shark. And then I hear, as I'm just going down, second shark. And I'm like, awesome.
So you got,
this is awesome. So the cage is relatively, it's spacious, right? It's me and another person. I think she was from maybe Sweden or Denmark. You kind of get on the group tour. And we're down there and we hear the second shark and we're looking around and we see one shark about to swim right in front of the cage. And I'm like, I got to do it. I got to stick my arm out and I got to try to touch the tail. Because I'm like, look, it's the tail. This thing is already gone. It's already, by this point, it's fine, right? It's fine. I've got all my fingers, FYI, not to spoil the story. But I think about it, I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm gonna do it. And I go to stick my hand out the cage and I get about wrist deep. Yeah. And out of nowhere, second shark from the deep comes right up and rattles our cage. I'm like, oh, I have never moved that hand so fast, and it never went outside that cage again.
Oh man!
Ooh, I thought it was a goner, man. I did. Even now it scares me, but it was awesome.
Oh man!
But that'll lead me to the second one, which takes place in Fiji.
All right.
And so this was part of the same trip. Right. Well, it turns out that the company I used for the Great White Shark Dive, months later, somehow reran my card and my bank canceled all my cards.
Oh,
all of them. Now I'm in Fiji by myself.
Yeah.
I've got no money. This is before cell phones.
Yeah.
This is like, okay, if I can find a telephone to call 1-800-COLLECT, right? I got no money. I had enough money to spend 2 nights at a hostel.
Yeah.
And this just happened to be during the Rugby World Cup.
All right.
And great. I got enough money. I'm at the hostel and there's a band playing my first night at the hostel called Ty and the Kavaholics.
Okay.
And Ty and them just gracious. They're an indigenous group of guys who's in the band and just the nicest guys you ever did meet. Well, long story short, fast forward, second night at the hostel is up. I got to check out in the morning.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? The woman who'd been bartending for me, she had been so sweet. Like I'd just been kind of chatting to her. She'd been giving me free water, right? And she's like, well, look, I know Ty and them. Let me talk to them. She went over and talked to Ty and the Kavaholics, and Ty and them agreed to let me come live with them in their 1-bedroom house.
So you're like a roadie?
Yeah, I'm a roadie for Ty and the Kavaholics. So I stayed with them in their house.
There you go.
And man, it was crazy. If you've never heard of kava, by the way, kava is a plant. It's a root of a plant. And the indigenous population of Fiji, which is also probably most well known, FYI, for cannibalism. Okay. I think the world record holder for eating the most humans is from Fiji.
So you're going to live with a band of potential cannibals.
Yeah, that was that. If you see, like even to this day, right? They still
made sense at the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're young, you're traveling. What else are you going to do? Well, again, greatest. I always find it's always the people with the least who gave the most.
Right.
And Ty and them were no different. It was him, 7 other people, and me, essentially in one bedroom house.
Yeah.
And we woke up every morning drinking kava.
Yeah.
And playing music. It was amazing.
Love
and
it.
I hope one day I get to go back and just say thank you again to that guy, because
man.
it was incredible. It's not often you get to live with a Fijian band in Mandytown. You know, killed my first chicken with them. Got to kill my first chicken.
Oh.
So yeah, we had.
Yeah.
So if we wanted food,
Yeah.
we had live chickens out by the river in Mandytown.
Yeah. So.
And so the missus showed me how to kill a chicken and pluck that bad boy.
Yep,
That
yeah.
was another world.
Well, speaking of food, call this like your badge of courage. What are some of the things that took sheer bravery for you to eat during your travels?
Sure. So, yeah, that's a good one, because, again, food is so important of every culture, right? Whether it's American or French, Italian, or Colombian, or Argentina, I mean, you name it, it's important. And it's no different even in Asia.
Right.
And so I would say most of the things, other than like South America, guinea pig. In Ecuador, that's one of the kind of the things that we eat. That was probably the most out there thing in Ecuador or in South America. When I usually go to Asia, this is when things, at least in terms of my palate, take a 180.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean I don't enjoy it. And in fact, if you give me some hot pot, I'll eat some pig brain or goose intestines or,
Is that on our cafeteria menu yet?
You know, I've not seen it, but I was really hoping for some tripe.
Pig bread.
Yeah. I have to say, pig brain is way better than cow brain. It's like, it's just a little more buttery in your mouth. It kind of just unravels and melts.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, but I think one of the more interesting ones though, is when you're there on business, right? There's such an honorable culture that they will always do something, whatever it may be, they'll do something to make sure you feel honored. Right. And the dinner table is no different.
Yeah.
And so they have culturally across many parts of Asia and other places, they believe that the parts of the animal that we eat impact our body.
All right.
Right. So if I've got problems with cartilage, I'm eating cartilage, right? If I want better brain function or things like this, I should eat brain, right? Yeah. And so they feel that there's somewhat of a correlation between what you eat and how your body works. Well, of course, being male, one of the things that they always wanted me to eat at any meal was the penis of any animal that we're eating, whether it's rabbit, whether it's bull,
strong like bull.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so no matter, without fail, I could be at the other end of the table, man. Yeah. And whoever the leader in charge.
Save it for Nick.
Yeah, exactly. They will bring it to you on a special saucer. And again, like, if you look at it from their perspective, like, wow, they're giving this away. Right. Like, to them, this is a big deal. Yeah. And they're giving it to someone else. And to you, you're like, oh, thank you so much. And, I'll sit. Again, I have come to love some of the food actually quite a bit. Again, like pig brain, I don't mind that, right? Yeah. Intestines, I don't mind that.
Yeah. But I remember in Michigan, my roommate was from Hong Kong, and the huge deal was shark fin soup.
Yes.
It was like, this was,
you pay a bundle.
Yeah, and it was just like, oh, this is, and I can still remember that, having it and everything.
And even now, like, I've seen they still have a lot of these beliefs, right? And they'll actually, how we can, beans or vegetables, things like this, they'll actually even can whole animals. I've seen a baby tiger cub once that was canned and was waiting, and they'll use it in their liquor, right? Yeah. Because they think it kind of just works through their liquor.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
And so, again, we may not always agree with the things we see. Yeah. And that's okay, right? Yeah. That's the point, is to be exposed to it and know that these things are happening, and then make a decision on how you want to deal with it.
Yeah. Study abroad, kind of, that's you know, uh, could talk it in general and then here at Lion, but kind of in general, just your thoughts as far as why, here's a student thinking about a study abroad experience. Why would you tell them, please pursue it?
Please.
Yeah, and then, kind of also just where are we with study abroad here at Lion?
Sure, sure. So number one, what would I tell a student in terms of benefits? First thing, we've got to know objective.
Right.
Is this for second language acquisition or is
Okay.
this for cultural exposure, right? And either one is valid. Either
Right.
one is fine, right?
Yeah.
But we want to know that because then we can better gear whatever experience you're going to have to that objective.
Right.
So that's number one. But just call it a blanket overall benefits kind of package. I would tell them to do it because literally, I think you all heard me talk about begging someone to let me volunteer.
Right. Yeah.
The next job I got, right, or sorry, 2 jobs later in the admissions office,
Right.
the director of admissions told me the main reason he hired me over every other candidate was because I had international experience. Full stop.
Yeah.
Right. And he's just like, look, you have exposure and experience that no other candidate could bring to the table.
Right.
And I thought that just as a young professional at the time was invaluable to hear because again, if you ask some of my friends or people in my family, right, like you don't leave the family, number one. Number two, if you do, it's going to be something worse.
Right.
It's never going to be as good with, and sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. And it happened to be in this case. I think if you're doing it for the right reason and you're keeping a pure, kind of pure heart stance on what you're working towards, it'll work out, right? But you got to be driven. You got to stay motivated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say job number one, just what you bring, intercultural communication,
Right.
again, critical inquiry. I think second language acquisition is so important. By 2050, it's touted that Spanish will be the new most spoken language in the world, right? Look at the other big languages: Arabic, Mandarin, French. There's so many languages outside of English.
Yeah.
And the more you know, even if it's just a little to try, the better you're going to connect.
Yeah. So study abroad here at Lion.
Sure. So we're revamping that. We just got Miss Cassidy Mitchell on board.
Yep.
So she's going to be giving us a little time every month with that, or every week, actually. So we're hoping to expand, our options.
Right.
There are 3 main options. You have direct exchange, which essentially means you pay your tuition and fees here, but you live and go to school there.
Yeah.
Wherever there may be, right? Your next one is a third-party vendor, right? So that's like a CIEE, an ISEP, things like this.
Right.
These guys, they're in it for profit, right? So it's going to cost a mint. It's going to be a premium to this, right? Typically, we're looking probably around $15,000, $20,000 just in tuition and fees for the semester, right? Your other options really gear around short-term programs. These could be intensive language courses, whether French or Spanish. It could be other languages potentially. But additionally, it might be, okay, I just want to do a cultural excursion with the Japanese club there in Akita, right? I want to go to Akita. I want to do Japanese tea ceremonies, Aikido classes. I want to do all this stuff, right? Maybe go on a sake tasting, right? So I think there's just a lot that the students can get from the study abroad, and we're gonna reinvigorate that. I've got a new partnership ready to be signed off on, essentially for Colombia, for France as well. We're looking at areas so that we don't have language barriers. Right, for those students without second language acquisition. Language is the biggest barrier they face.
And probably the biggest intimidator too,
Sure.
For students. And we do have the trip to Poland, with our students. So.
We've got a trip to Poland coming up, and we're revamping applications and proposal procedures and processes. I mean, I'm hopeful that we'll get professors submitting proposals. I would love to start seeing a minimum of five trips a year.
Yeah.
That's what I would like to see.
Awesome.
We want to develop spotlight trips for departments. Like I think business should have an annual or biannual, right?
Right.
Almost all of our departments should, right?
Yeah.
So,
all right. Final question.
Okay.
This is a podcast about careers. So somebody listening saying, I want to do exactly what this guy is doing.
Sure.
What would you recommend? How would students pursue a career like in international education?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. There's a lot of different ways. A lot of jobs that you're going to do, even if they're outside of higher education, will have transferable skill sets,
Right.
number one. So make sure you can recognize what your skill sets are. That's going to be a big one. That's going to tell you which knowledge community, right? Remember we talked about those knowledge communities, enrollment management. We like to call it strategic enrollment management, actually. Holistic programming. This might be international student services, right? Are you interested in learning how to travel, plan travel, crisis management, risk mitigation? That's study abroad and short-term programs or scholars even, right? So I think that's the next step is find out where your passion kind of lies.
Right.
For me, it was just helping internationals and helping expose domestics to what internationals and international travel can do for them, right? And I get to do that on a daily basis, and I love it. So find out where your passion lies, because once you find a job that meets your passion, happiness is very sure to follow, in my opinion. If you find the meaning, if you find the passion, you're going to be good. Talk to people in international education, internships, whatever it is, right? Sometimes, again, I was 27, I had 3 degrees, and I had to volunteer for months.
Right.
Don't look, pride comes before the fall. There's nothing that's too good for us.
Right.
I never ask an employee of mine to do something I haven't done. Right.
Even
the IE field.
Oh, not eat pig brain.
Not eat pig brain,
okay,
no,
good.
right? But like if it's airport pickups or
Yep,
if it's whatever it is, I've done it all, and I that's the service we have to provide.
Well, great way to close.
Oh man, you're too nice.
No, Nicholas, thank you for your time.
Thank you,
It
buddy.
was wonderful, and thank you for listening. This is Pat Lynch, and back there, producer Jayson, as always, and we want to thank you for listening to the Career Pathways podcast. As I always ask, producer Jayson, where can they find the Career Pathways podcast?
Nowhere. No, they can find it at 99.97% of platforms that are streaming, are producing podcast content. So basically, the same number that is of germs and bacteria on German.
And he says that with a lot of conviction, but
I know that 100%.
he knows,
I know it 99.96%.
50%, it works 100% of the time. All right, but thank you very much, and we'll see you again on the Career Pathways podcast. Take care.
This broadcast is sponsored in part by Lyon College and by KILT Studios.